my head, the priority was 99% I'm a cinematographer, and I kind of gave 1% of myself to earning a living with a day job. There just came a point where I thought, I've got to go all in. I've just got to give it a go and see what happens. My name is Eben Bolter, BSC. I'm a cinematographer. Most recently, I shot episodes of The Last of Us for HBO and Secret Invasion for Marvel. I started out not knowing anything about cinematography. I studied business studies and specialized in marketing. And I ended up living in Tokyo, Japan. I was there for 2 years. I was selling advertising for a magazine, working in an office, wearing a suit. And it's at that time that this video mode came out on the 5D. And so I suddenly had this tool in my hand. I was able to start making images. And that's really where my sort of love was with cinema. I went down this kind of journey of just consuming everything I could to do with filmmaking. Reading books, watching YouTube videos, behind the scenes videos on DVDs at the time. That really was my film school. I moved back to the UK from Japan. I got a job in a locations company. So I was working in the UK around the film industry, started to meet people, started to go to film studios, but it was still a job. And then in my spare time, I would pick up the camera as much as I could and shoot things. So I quit my job and I had no income at all other than what was going to come to me as a cinematographer. So if I can get paid to be a cinematographer, it doesn't matter if I'm filming a corporate video, at least I'm on camera being a cinematographer, being true to what I end up being. I've always had that sense of on every little job, I want to learn one thing. As I learned, I guess things got better. My experience grew. I met better directors. I got better projects and I never went back. I worked very hard, but I also got lucky.
Listen to me. If I get into trouble down there, you make every shot count.
Got this.
I played The Last of Us on PlayStation 3 the day it came out. I was a massive fan of it. It really influenced me. The world they created, the music, characters, I absolutely loved it. So when it was announced they were adapting it, and it was Craig Mazin who was going to be adapting it with Neil Druckmann, I said to my agent straight away, this is a dream project. Listening to Craig and Neil talk about the approach, it played into all of the sensibilities that I do naturally have, which is story-led visual filmmaking. My approach on every project, I'd say, is, to focus on what the story is and to convey that story the best as I possibly can. Part of the adaptation process, obviously we've got the video game there, and Neil Druckmann and his team have visually told this story before. The big difference is gameplay, you can control Joel and a little bit of Ellie, and you're following them and you make these decisions, and that feeds into combat and to gameplay and all of these things. Whereas in the adaptation, Craig's scripts sort of went in different directions and used the television format in different ways. The Last of Us is obviously a very emotional story, so much of it is character-led and about performance. So, handheld operating just allows you to be attached to characters, be in the room with them, and it just takes off sort of the edge of some of those moments where if maybe we were doing complicated, motion tracked crane moves, it's sort of putting too much storytelling on top of this world. We didn't want to do that. We wanted to be much more character-driven storytellers.
Slow down.
This is slow.
I've always been a very logical cinematographer when it comes to justifying where light comes from. I'm not naturally the sort of cinematographer who'll just light something to look good. I always like to justify what time of day, what's the weather, where's the sun. I still personally just like to ground things in a sort of reality that's at least beholden to the show itself. When I'm lighting the set, something like Bill and Frank's house, I'm just trying to make it feel like a location. And I'm trying to put the sky in, I'm trying to put the sun in. Is it a cloudy day, a sunny day? And then inside the room, I'm just trying to use light coming through windows to make it feel like we've happened upon this atmosphere in the room that tells the story. It has to be grounded in reality. In The Last of Us, there's, a set of rules, and that kind of gives you a high concept. It gives you a rule book. For me, I love those limitations because then I'm working with inside those rules.
I've been
staring at this the whole time. Is it antique?
1948.
Wow.
In episode 3, Bill and Frank at the piano, we really wanted to prioritize performance there. So, we use multiple cameras cross-shot to give them as much respect as possible to do what it is they need to do. The minutiae of what I'm doing with lighting and cinematography takes a back seat. And that's, in my opinion, the correct approach to get the best scene possible.
So, who's the girl? The girl you're singing about?
There is no girl.
I know.
Frank wakes up in the middle of the night and there's chaos, confusion, and war outside. So anything we could do to really make that feel as chaotic and dangerous as possible. Bill has these traps that he's been setting throughout the episode, and we knew there would be this sort of flamethrower effect that he's been rigging, and that's all in the script. Fire is obviously incredible for that. It's alive, it's moving. We all know how hot and dangerous it feels. Particularly at nighttime in The Last of Us, I'm usually dealing with moonlight, a little bit of electricity here and there, but the resources are kind of scarce. This was an opportunity to do something a little bit different. There was a lot of testing involved with the fire. We had a pre-light the day before. I wanted to make sure we were getting enough luminosity to see what we needed to see.
And then it was a case of, augmenting that. So I was using hidden lights behind buildings to throw tungsten dimmed lights and some LED lights, lamps that give you a kind of fire effect that were just hidden from view to emphasize the fire. And to further emphasize it, I wanted to introduce rain into the scene. So we had a rain machine, and so we'd get all the reflections, we would see the fire through the falling rain.
And then the other thing we did throw at it was lightning.
We thought it would be interesting to also just have a storm playing, so through that rain have lightning strikes and use those lightning strikes dramatically to reveal, almost spotlight the characters in those instances of the flashes of lightning
that my gaffer rigged. And he was just at the monitor next to me, and I could just sort of point at him, he'd press the button, you get a hit of lightning. There's a lot more technical work that needs to be done to convey that story. And the performance is, of course, important, but it's much more part of the big picture, and there's a lot more cinematography that needs to be done to help the audience feel what the characters are feeling. For that episode, that was probably the biggest sequence, the hardest to do, but I think on a sort of visceral visual level, it's one of my favorite scenes of the episode.
And then I'm like, I'm gonna ask you a million more times, and he's like, whoa!
Whoa, whoa, go! Episode 5 had a big sequence in a cul-de-sac, which was probably the biggest technical challenge, and the lighting for that was the largest scale I'd ever had to do. Because we were shooting night exteriors in Calgary, I wasn't able to put textiles up, so we had to come up with a solution for a soft, flat top light that could conceivably be moonlight, but that also wind could pass through. So that was something that me and my gaffer really had to do a lot of work to figure out how to make that possible. At this point in the story, the characters are walking out of Kansas. They can't use their flashlights for a reason in the story. And all I've really got for motivation is moonlight at the beginning. So I knew I'd have to do this blanket moonlight that would fit into our naturalistic world, which is kind of a difficult thing because moonlight is sort of inherently fake. Moonlight is a really interesting thing for cinematographers because we all have our own opinions on what works and what looks good. But then story by story, project by project, we sort of dial that up and down relative to the tone of that piece. So for The Last of Us, again, it was in this naturalistic world, thinking about what I would do for naturalistic moonlight. I wanted to always have the motivation of a simple backlight that didn't feel too theatrical. But I also wanted to have what I call room tone, which would be, it's just that sort of invisible light, ambience that kind of comes from nowhere. I feel like on every job I've ever done, the moonlight I've done has been a tiny bit different. And maybe there's one I prefer over the other, but as long as it's correct for that story, for that project, I feel okay with it. There's no definitive rule book for success. It's a very sort of personal thing, and beauty truly is in the eye of the beholder. As long as I'm making something that someone likes, it has worth. And you're not born with the ability to be a cinematographer. It's something that you learn, and you learn it through experience, and you learn it through your own interpretation of the world. And I think as long as you're being true to that, following your instincts, you're gonna offer something, and hopefully someone is going to like that. And most importantly, hopefully you're going to like it. So my advice to aspiring cinematographers, just find whatever it is that you like and tap into whatever that is and keep doing it. When I look back at work I did 10 years ago, when I didn't really know anything, there was like a blissful ignorance to that work that I love and I kind of miss. So shoot every day, learn every day, and on every single project, just try and get a little bit better or learn one little thing. And you'll always be progressing, you'll always be creating, and you'll just continue to learn like we all are.